Welcome to the Teachers on Fire podcast, where I profile agents of growth and transformation in education today. Each guest shares their highs, their lows, their passions, their goals, and the resources that are shaping their thinking and inspiring their practice. For show notes and links from each episode, visit teachersonfire.net. You can also follow the show at Teachers on Fire on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And of course, please subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm your host, Tim Cavey. Let's meet today's guest. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Jennifer Pieratt. Jennifer is an educator, mom, speaker, coach, and project-based learning nerd. She offers tips, tools, and inspiration for project-based learning and is the author of 3 books, including Keep It Real with PBL, Secondary, a practical guide for planning project-based learning. Follow Jenny on Twitter at crafted_JennyP, on Instagram at crafted_Jenny Pieratt, and on her blog at craftedcurriculum.com. Jenny, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Are you ready to talk education?
Always. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's great to connect with you. And of course, I'm in an 8th grade context where I feel like I'm still finding my way with PBL. So this is simply self-interest that prompts me to have you on the program today. I look forward to learning from you. But let's start out with your personal, or your professional context. What does that look like for you on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I'm located in Southern California. I live in a small little beach community, Cardiff by the Sea. And my work really is different every day, which I feel so fortunate that I get to have an impact on a lot of different districts, mostly in my community. But I definitely travel to different states and countries as well to support teachers with project-based learning. So anywhere from, professional development workshops after school to one-on-one project coaching to curriculum design for districts and companies that are looking for high-quality projects.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to start with story time. So, Jenny, if you would, share with us about a low moment or an experience of adversity that you faced somewhere in your teaching or education career and describe how you overcame it.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny for me to start out with a low moment, but I've been thinking about this question, and it's actually, I think, really telling to where I'm at in my life now. So I had been a classroom teacher for 11 years and ended up leaving the classroom to go work for 2 national companies that supported teachers with project-based learning implementation. And did that for 3 years. And it was incredible work. I learned so much and just got to meet really lovely people and see PBL in such a wide variety of schools: small school, big school, private school, charter school, urban, rural. But, at the time I had a 1 and a 2-year-old, so I was traveling a ton. And as much as I loved the work, I also loved my 2 kids, and I just wasn't around for them. So I decided to take a break from the travel and return back to the classroom. And it was the hardest thing I have ever done. I had always taught secondary, and I thought, hey, teaching is teaching, right? I can do this elementary school thing. And I, did all the credentialing and the tests and the coursework that I needed to for teaching elementary. And I thought it would be a breeze and it would be so fun. My daughter was going to be going to school where I was teaching, and it almost killed me. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. And I tell you what, it really was the impetus to my work now. I have such mad respect for elementary teachers, all teachers, obviously, but elementary especially, man. It is really, really challenging work to be with kids all day, teach them every subject, not have a prep period, and just you're molding humans, little humans. It's really, really tough work. So it was hard, and it was a little bit of a dark time for me because it was so hard. But out of that came the work that I'm doing now that I just love so much. So it's kind of my Phoenix story.
That resonates with me, Jenny, because again, I teach 8th grade, but when I look into primary classrooms, I think about those teachers and they are just on all the time, all day. And it's impressive and it's scary because I just think, as the grades go up, I mean, obviously we have different challenges and demands on us at every level, but in those upper grades, you do have those opportunities, right, where your learners are typically engaged and you have a few moments to maybe get some of your own work done or collect your thoughts or whatever. But I just think in those primary years, it is go, go, go.
Oh yeah, you can't take your eye off them for a second. And I mean, really, I think every teacher should have to be an early primary teacher, because talk about learning best practices around scaffolding. I mean, it's like you have to scaffold to scaffold to scaffold. It's like it's crazy.
Right. Yeah. Don't leave any steps uncovered. Well, you recently published this third book, as I mentioned in the introduction. It's called Keep It Real with PBL Secondary, a practical guide for planning project-based learning. So, as I mentioned, this speaks right to where I am at, and I know many other teachers are moving into PBL and trying to incorporate more multidisciplinary projects in their instruction. Talk to us about the book. Why did you write it, and what can educators expect to take away?
Yeah, this book is like my third baby. And it really, I had actually self-published the first edition
Oh,
of
wow.
it, because it really was just a compilation of all the work I had been doing in schools. That it felt really messy, the work I was doing, and I wanted something neat and tidy that I could leave behind teachers when I wasn't there to kind of hold their hand through the work. So it ended up getting picked up by Corwin, and obviously a much more robust version now of the two books, elementary and secondary. So it's been nice to tease out the different grade levels, because PBL looks very different in elementary than secondary. All the way down from calendaring and management to just the actual interdisciplinary nature of elementary versus secondary projects. So my hope with this book is that it leaves behind something for teachers that they can come back to constantly. It's very practical. There's a lot of planning forms, a lot of models, and just resources for them to use to help them through the process. Because, when a teacher goes through PBL training, it can be really overwhelming. Like, it's just a lot to take in all at once. And so the idea is they can kind of keep coming back to this and continue to grow with it. So it's designed for someone who's not only brand new to PBL, but someone who wants to continue to grow through the PBL journey and can keep kind of coming in and out of it and developing their projects and refining their work.
I see on your site, Jenny, that in addition to your books, you also offer some great online courses, workshops, and coaching around PBL. And by the way, I have to say, your website is amazing, very impressive. What do you think is unique about your philosophy and your style of delivery when it comes to PBL?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. And I think, especially because of my professional DNA, having come from High Tech High and BIE, now PBL Works, and New Tech Network, each of those leading organizations in PBL has such a different flavor for project design. And I think my flavor is a kind of a combination of those things, but more importantly, it really is a result of the challenges that I saw with each of those approaches to project design, or lack thereof in some places. When I was working for these companies, I would be sitting next to a teacher, and I'd hand them their planning forms that had a staple in it. And I would just watch their face go white. It was so overwhelming to them. And I would go rogue. I would just say, put the packet aside. Like, let's just get a poster paper, butcher paper, and let's just flow. Let's just talk me through it. And I would kind of draw out my thinking. And in my opinion, it doesn't need to be this huge involved process initially. It can be very simple. So I think what's unique to my approach is it's simplified. And it also kind of it's like an onion. Like, it kind of just like reveals different phases as you move through it, but it is much more baby steps into it rather than kind of overwhelming the teacher out the gate.
Hmm. I think that's so critical because by the time it's fully planned and completed, sometimes these PBL units can be, as you say, quite massive. I mean, they're bringing in curricular competencies and learning targets from so many different areas. And it really is a beautiful thing in the end. But to get there, it takes those baby steps, right? And so I like what you're saying about making it accessible for teachers. Well, just before we move on from PBL, I'd love to hear from you. And I might be catching you off guard here, but is there a project that you've seen lately or heard about? I'm sure you've written about them. Is there a project that really appeals to you as a favorite at maybe any level? It could be middle school, high school. Is there one that really gets you going?
Yes. Well, there's a few, but one in particular that's just on top for me is a project from a school that I work with, Lake Elementary in Vista. And it was developed by the fifth grade team. It's called Silent Voices. And it's a project that looks at the American Revolution through the lens of non-Eurocentric perspectives. So people who we often don't hear from in our history books, and asks students to kind of compare through two-voice poetry the different experiences of people who lived through the American Revolution. And then it turns to kind of this contemporary angle of looking at issues in the community today and kind of comparing and contrasting past to present. So it's a very layered project. And I think what I love about it is it's really pushing student thinking. I mean, you want to talk about, being up there in depths of knowledge. It's pushing really hard. Every person who sees a project says, "This fifth grade did this?" And it's, yeah, fifth grade, they can do it. I mean, elementary students can do some pretty amazing things. And I've actually seen this same project modified in eighth grade and all the way up to 11th grade because of the depth of thinking that it really pushes students.
Well, I love the authenticity and the relevance that I hear there as well. That's really cool. Well, as you look across your PLN, Jenny, and your own practice, your own instruction and coaching, what else besides PBL is really setting you on fire about education today?
I think technology, obviously, when it's used as a tool to enhance project-based learning, I love seeing schools that are implementing PBL taking it to the next level by really engaging in their community and doing things like exhibitions and field work rather than field trips. Taking students out to collect data, bringing in experts, and using resources in new ways than I think traditionally we've thought about, field trips. And it makes me especially excited when I see things like exhibition and fieldwork happening in the elementary levels. I've seen some kindergarten classes doing some incredible work with scientists and surveying the community and making observations. And I think I get most excited when I see littles doing that kind of work and being so engaged in things it's important work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like that too. Something I've been thinking about lately is the Flipgrid QR capacity that they offer. How can I show or share out my students' learning with parents and with the broader community using that technology? And I like what you're saying about bringing the learning to the classroom, and I still need to do more of that in my own practice. There's really no reason why we can't bring the museums and the sites and the experts of the world into our classroom. Well, how are you looking to grow professionally and improve your practice in the coming year? We're here at the dawn of 2020. Can you share about a specific professional goal or maybe another project that you're currently working on?
Yeah, I was actually just thinking of this in light of New Year's resolutions, which I normally don't do resolutions because I'm a very goal-oriented person. So I don't know. I just kind of think they're silly for me. But I was thinking about, I do kind of always kind of come up with some fun posts for social media for January related to PBL resolutions. So my big focus for next year is to collect and highlight, showcase more math and world language resources for PBL. I think they always feel like the forgotten children. And they both are unique, and there aren't a ton of resources out there. And I always feel bad when I, go to a school and I'm doing a workshop and I find them kind of sitting in the corner and they say, "Why teach math?" And it always ends up being a sidebar conversation. So I would love to just have more resources available that I could point them to. And again, when I'm not there, that they can come back to. So that's something that I hope to really build out next year.
Jenny, outside of education, let's move completely beyond pedagogy and beyond project-based learning and of course the school building. What is another area of learning for you? What is it that ignites your passions and brings you alive as a human being?
I love fitness and nutrition. I'm a very active person. I think I'm my best self, and my kids and my husband would tell you this too. I'm my best self when I get a good workout in every day. So within that, I feel like I've tried a lot of new hobbies as an adult. I kind of got into triathlons for a long time, and I've just started doing boxing. And I do hip hop dancing. I do a lot of different things. I think it's really important to push yourself out of your comfort zone and really continue to be a learner in different ways. My sister's a registered dietitian, and so I'm forever learning from her about just how the body responds to different types of food. And there's so much science involved in nutrition. So we geek out on that. I think had I not have gone the route I did in my life, if I had to do it all over again, I would probably go into the field that she's in, because I think it's fascinating to learn about just about the human body.
Quick sidetrack on the nutrition. My family just dipped into the Explained series on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen that series come up, but it's basically a documentary series that takes looks at these different issues of our time. And we watched some of an episode on food and where our food habits as a planet are going. And I heard a frightening statistic that we will, as a planet, consume more meat in the next 30 years than we have in all of world history. Isn't that scary?
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah,
That's nuts.
it just speaks to the incredible scale of our meat production and consumption right now. So that's a whole other issue. And I'm sure as a nutrition fan, I don't know if you're a vegetarian. I am not, but I'm sure you would advocate for reducing our meat intake. Am I right about that?
Yeah, but I also can't help but think about that. Sounds like a project idea right there.
It does. It does. Well, share about a personal or a productivity hack that contributes to your success. Jenny, you're a PhD, you're an accomplished writer. You've published now 3 books and counting, and you are speaking all over the place. So, how do you get it all done?
So people laugh when I tell them this. I'm a paper planner gal. I use the Happy Planner, and I calendar out every day, which includes my workouts every day. Sometimes it includes hanging out with my husband, which is terrible, I know.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, not every day. But I calendar out pretty much it's by hour, the way the calendar is broken down. And so I kind of list out at the beginning of the week all the things I need to get done, and then I assign those things to actual times in the day. So it's a pretty regimented day, but my kids both play competitive sports, and I like to have my alone time too. And running a business, aside from being an educator and being in schools, it's just a lot to juggle. So I've found that for me, building in the time, if I don't do that, it all just won't get done.
So it sounds like blocking time, which I'm a big fan of as well, when I'm really on my game, that is happening over here. But if it's on a paper version, is it something that you carry with you at all times?
I don't. Actually, it's funny. I was with the school all day yesterday, and someone had asked me about an appointment on Monday. So I had to call my husband, who, thank goodness, was working from home. And I was like, "Hey, can you take a picture of my Monday and text it to me really quickly?" So it usually works out. If I'm traveling, I'll take a picture of like my next couple weeks, in case I need to reference it while I'm on the road. But I use Calendly, but then I end up, whatever gets scheduled, I end up writing it on my calendar. So if it's not on my calendar, it's not happening, like my written one.
Got it. Well, that is a nice hybrid system you've got going on. I'm glad to hear that is working for you. And again, I think we all need to be intentional about how our week shapes up, right? If we really want to get into deep work and do things that have impact, we have to plan in advance. Well, Jenny, it is time for your quick picks. And here we want to know the education voices and resources that are shaping your practice and inspiring your thinking today. So, starting at Twitter, tell us about someone we should follow there and share why they've been inspiring you lately.
One of my favorite teachers to follow is Camille Nunnenkamp, from Lake Elementary. She's a fifth grade teacher, actually, who helped design that project I shared earlier, Silent Voices. I just love, she's really active, but she's always showcasing students and the work that's happening in classrooms. And I think it's so important for people to see, because pretty much every teacher, when I first start working with them, they say, I just need to see what it looks like. Like, what does PBL look like for, elementary, or what do you mean? Like, how do you manage the process? It's very technical questions. So I feel like she just gives you this beautiful snapshot into what it looks like in action. And her class is set up so that she runs 3 to 4 projects in the year, which is a lot in a traditional setting. So there's a lot of variety, and she's really great about technology integration. So I think she's just a nice snapshot for people to see what it looks like in action.
And, when I think about your questions that you hear from teachers about, I just need to see what it looks like. I mean, what a great argument or a motivation for teachers to share out their learning and share pictures of what is going on in their own practice. I think so many teachers think, oh, well, my message isn't important or it's not valuable. But the more we make Twitter an actual learning community, a learning network, I think the more we all benefit. So thank you for sharing that. And I'll make sure to link up that Twitter account in the show notes on teachersonfire.net. Next, Jenny, point us to an edtech tool that you currently love using somewhere in your practice.
I love Evernote, and I like this for professional reasons, but also for educators to think about in their classroom. It's a great management and organization tool, and it syncs up across all your devices, which is a beautiful thing. So it's something that I use to kind of just capture ideas, especially for project brainstorming. My ideas come to me at the most random times, like usually when I'm on vacation at the grocery store, checking out at a store, at just random times. So I'll pull up Evernote and I have one of my notepads is project ideas and I'll just dump it into there. And then when I come to sit down, it just transfers over to my laptop so I can pull it up from there, turn it into a project plan, share it with the teacher the next time I see them. It's so streamlined and easy to use.
Mm-hmm. Recommend a book, one that you've been reading lately, perhaps, or maybe one of your all-time faves that's been really influential in your practice.
Oh, you don't want to see my bookshelf. It is deep. It's the only thing I hoard are my books. I have way too many to tell you about my favorites. But recently I've been reading Innovate Inside the Box, which Innovator's Mindset was such a great read. But this one I feel like speaks to my work much more now because it is about all the barriers that teachers are facing and still overcoming those barriers to do good work with kids.
Jenny, are you a podcast listener? If you are, tell us about one that you've been really enjoying, and this doesn't need to be education related.
I think if people have not listened to Serial, it is like my all-time favorite podcast. Like you can't stop listening to it. It's so good. But I just started recently listening to Live and Die in LA, which is kind of similar. Nothing will ever be as good as Serial in my opinion, but it's pretty close. It's good.
Last question, Jenny, just for fun, moving away from anything too serious here. What are you watching on Netflix right now?
I have been watching The Crown. It's my guilty pleasure because I was a history teacher in my last life and just geek out over Winston Churchill and Queen Elizabeth.
I am loving that one too. It's so grand. It's so magnificent. It's hard to pull away from, and they do such a great job. Just as Jenny said, if you are historically inclined, you've got to give it a watch. Well, Jenny, you bring so much value in this whole area of PBL and just your vision of learning today. What are the best ways for the listeners to connect with you online and get in touch with your services?
So I'm active on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I would say Instagram is where I post the most project ideas and resources most frequently. So that's at crafted_Jenny P. And then my website includes a contact form where folks can reach out to me and also learn more about the work that I do.
Sounds good, Jenny. Again, thank you so much for sharing your time generously with the podcast today on relatively short notice, I might add. This has been fun and enlightening, and I'm so thankful to make this connection and continue to learn with you. Take care, and let's talk again soon.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care.
Just before we sign off today, I'd like to share some highlights from around the Teachers on Fire community this week. If you are a longtime listener of the podcast, you may recognize this segment, and you'll know that for some weeks now, I've been giving quite a long list of shout-outs, quoting comments, and recognizing different listeners and supporters of the podcast. Well, for reasons of time and energy and just the production efficiency, in order to keep these episodes going out each week, I've had to shorten some of my systems. So I think going forward, what I will try to do is highlight one quote or comment or excerpt from each of the platforms where Teachers on Fire can be found. And that means I'll be checking in on Twitter, on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and anything else that I'm forgetting about. So first of all, today, let's start on Twitter. And the quote I've decided to highlight comes from Bob Bednar, who has just been an outstanding supporter of the podcast this year. You can find him on Twitter at @BBednar. And he tweeted, Love what you're doing at Mr. Cavey with at Teachers on Fire. You are inspiring each of us to truly make a difference in students' lives. Thank you so much for that, Bob. I can't say what an affirmation that is of the work that I am doing and the content I'm creating. That means the world to know that the show is in some small ways affecting professional practice for the better. Next stop, we'll go over to Instagram, where Kelly Bahari at KBAHRI6 wrote, quote, Daniel Bauer, awesomeness. He is so knowledgeable about education, leadership, and change. Lots of hands up emojis there. Another knock it out of the park podcast. You are on fire. And again, a lot of fire emojis. Well, Kelly, you have been, like Bob, another phenomenal supporter of the podcast this year. You are really part of that exclusive club of faithful people who encourage me each week, and I am so grateful, and I look forward to having Kelly on the show in a future episode. She's agreed to come on, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Teachers, I will also invite you to check out the Teachers on Fire magazine on Medium. This week, we featured a piece by Tammy Breitweiser. You'll find her on Twitter at TLBreit, or rather TLBREIT. And her piece was called How to Increase Intentional Student Talk in Your Classroom. Tammy walks us through a number of practical protocols that she uses in her practice, including back-to-back and face-to-face, tea party, and boxing. If the ones doing the speaking are doing the learning, let's get our students talking. And I know I have a colleague in 8th grade who is really struggling with a quiet class this year. Just eliciting contributions from them has been a little painful for her. And so Tammy speaks in particular to those classrooms, but really to all classrooms. We want to get our students talking more. And then next, still on the Teachers on Fire magazine on Medium, Caitlin Giordano at Mrs._Giordano published The Power of Fantasy Novels, where she focused on the 3rd edition of the Scythe trilogy by Neil Shusterman, a book called The Toll. The timing could not have been better for me, as my boys and I literally finished that exact book and trilogy by audiobook earlier that same week. What an amazing series it was. I have to tell you, my boys would not let me skip a day, one commute without listening to that book. So if you do have teenagers, consider tuning in for that one. The Teachers on Fire magazine is a Medium publication. You'll find it on medium.com or on the Medium app. And if you're already an education blogger, I want you to consider joining our growing writing team there. You can continue to publish content on your own blog, and you keep full credit and ownership of your content on Medium. Message me at Teachers on Fire on any social media platform for more details. Well, I'll leave you with this quote from my reading, Teachers on Fire. It comes from a book called Culturize, Every Student, Every Day, Whatever It Takes. And it's a book written by Jimmy Cassis. You'll find him on Twitter at Cassis_Jimmy. And he writes, connecting with kids and valuing their talents and voices is the first step to creating the kind of school culture and experiences that will impact students for a lifetime. And isn't that what it's all about? Isn't that what we're there for? Again, I'll read it one more time. Connecting with kids and valuing their talents and voices is the first step to creating the kind of school culture and experiences that will impact students for a lifetime. Thank you for that quote, Jimmy. Again, I'm your host, Tim Cavey, and I'm so grateful that you decided to spend some of your day listening to this podcast. I hope that in some way the content you heard today from Jenny Pieratt ignited your thinking and inspired your practice. And I'll meet you next week right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. Have a great week.